Hello and welcome to the Today's Homeowner Weekly Podcast. We're here to help you with the challenges we all face as homeowners. I'm Danny Lipford.
And I'm Joe Truini. And each week, Danny and I are here on the podcast to answer any and all home improvement questions.
And we want to hear from you. Send us your questions or comments at todayshomeowner.com/podcast.
Okay, Danny, let's get started.
Today's Homeowner Podcast is brought to you by the Home Depot, how doers get more done. This week, we share a few tips on how to properly waterproof a shower stall. You know, a lot of people want to take the old traditional tub and shower out and put a curbless shower in, whether there are some physical limitations or just to make it easy and more comfortable to take a shower. But boy, when you do that, you need to make sure that you are waterproofing it before you put the ceramic on. It's really not that hard, but we give a couple different techniques to make sure it's a success.
Yeah, because waterproofing at the time of construction is the time to do it. If you think the tile and the grout's going to keep water out, it will not. So,
That's right.
Waterproofing is really important. We're also going to talk to a homeowner who wants to paint her stained cabinets, which is a perfectly doable job. But these cabinets happen to have some hairline cracks in them. And she wants to know, will the primer and paint hide those cracks? Well, they won't, but we give her some other solutions to make sure the job comes out perfectly smooth.
We also talk with a gentleman in Texas where it does get pretty hot, especially during the summer. You sit out on your patio and you can just feel the heat radiating down from the ceiling. What can you do? Will insulation help? What about some additional ventilation? We guide him through exactly what he needs to do so that he can enjoy that summer just a little bit more.
And what do you do when you're using spray paint and the tip clogs? Do you have to toss out the can? Not necessarily, and I'll share a simple solution on how to get that can spraying once again.
Oh man, we're going to have some fun here, so let's get started. Hey, let's go to Kentucky right now. Deb is on the line. Deb, how can we help you? And welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello there, Deb. What can we help you with?
Well, I'm thinking of redoing my bathroom to make it, give it a curbless shower.
Uh-huh.
I'm having a hip replacement, and I need to make it easily accessible. So, Looking at the project, is hardy board or cement backer board or the orange products any better than another? Because I'll be doing the work myself.
Well, I'll tell you what, my buddy Joe Truini there written a fantastic tile book, and he had to dive into all of those kind of questions and scenarios. And Joe, I don't know if one's better than the other, but they're just a little bit different. But
right.
The main thing is following those manufacturer guidelines so that you can be sure that when that tile's installed, that it's not no chance of leaking at all. What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, Deb, that's exactly right. I mean, these products are designed for professional tile installers, and there's no real trick to it, but you have to know how it's installed and follow those directions exactly. The orange products you're referring to are Schluter. I think they're based out of Germany, and their North American headquarters are in Canada, but they're sold throughout the U.S., and I've used both Schluter products, and I've used Hardy backer board from James Hardie, and they both work perfectly well if installed as designed. If you're asking which is easier, well, Schluter has a relatively new product called Kerdi board. That's Kerdi, Kerdi board, which is polystyrene tile substrate. So it's essentially a half-inch thick sheet of styrofoam, for lack of a better word. So it's not heavy. You cut it with a utility knife. You screw it up. It has a special fabric on each side, and including the tiling, the side it accepts tile. And then James Hardie came out with a new backer board. The problem with backer board is it's never been waterproof or even hardly water resistant. Water soaks right through it because it's just cement, right? So you've always had to apply a roll-on or brush on a waterproofing membrane like Red Guard or something like that. But James Hardie has a brand new product. I think it's called Hardie Backer with Hydro Defense. And it basically is just Hardie board with the waterproofing membrane already attached, which makes it a lot easier to install. So I would say as long as you're following the directions, one's not any harder than the other. Hardie board would be less expensive.
Yes, I looked, and after looking at your site, Today's Homeowner, and
right.
Hardie board says it's just about the same, and I think it's like half the price.
Right. So. Yeah. Schluter products are beautifully engineered, but they are relatively expensive.
Yes. Is Hardie board still heavy?
It's relatively heavy, but they're only 3 by 5, so they 3 feet by 5 feet, so they're not terribly heavy. You can move them around.
Okay. Great.
All right.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
We love to get emails and certainly appreciate all the wonderful emails we got this week. You can send us one right now, todayshomeowner.com/ask. That's what Deb did from Kentucky, and she says, I need to paint my kitchen cabinets. The problem is the cabinets appear to be really dried out. I thought about replacing them, but that's no longer in the budget. I'm single, so it's just me doing whatever I can do. Good for you, Deb. The insert of doors are very thin and have hairline cracks in the wood. The outer frames look fine. I don't know if spraying primer and the final coat will cover the cracks. Should I be filling those cracks first? And she sent some very good pictures. It shows some stained cabinets, look like oak cabinets there. And so when you have a framed or a kind of a recessed panel where you have a thin piece of wood in the center part of it, it's not uncommon, even though that's generally plywood that's not susceptible to cracks very much. A lot of times you'll have a little crack here and there, and you hate to have a nice finished painted look and then cracks peek back through. So, Joe, we talk a lot about painting cabinets, and certainly one of the first things that anybody would want to do when you have a gloss on that is to kind of dull that gloss, which you can do with either a liquid sandpaper deglosser, or you can use a, say, 200 grit paper to sand it off. But what do you think about some of those thin hairline cracks? If they're there, it's kind of like a front door. You see that a lot on front doors, yeah, where you can almost see the sun coming through there. And if you don't do something to them, it's going to return no matter how much paint you put on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What Deb is referring to, she calls them the inserts of the door. Or she says are thin. She's talking about the door panel, and the frame is hardwood, but that panel, since it's thin, is probably 1/4-inch plywood. And these are typically on relatively inexpensive cabinets, so this is not an unusual problem. But she also asked a question we hear all the time, right, Danny? Would spraying primer and the final paint coat cover the cracks? No. In a word, no. It might cover it, as soon as you brush it on, and it may cover it for a few days. But the reason you have the cracks at all is changes in humidity and temperature. The wood's moving, and so the paint's not going to stop that. So, the best thing to do, as Danny said, clean it, sand it really well, get it, knock down the gloss, and you can fill it. They do make a paintable acrylic caulk, and also a wood putty, depending on the size of these cracks. So you could try hiding them behind that, sanding it smooth, and then apply the appropriate primer, and then top coat. But that doesn't necessarily mean these cracks aren't going to appear again. They'll certainly be less obvious for a while. But wood's going to move. Those panels are typically not glued or nailed in place for that exact reason. If you ever close your door and you hear the panel banging around, kind of like rattling, well, that's the reason. It shouldn't be glued, so it gives it that extra space, allows it to expand and contract, and hopefully not crack. In this case, it's the veneer on the outside. You could sand it a little bit, and then, as I said, paintable acrylic caulk or wood putty is what I would use.
Time for our Best New Product segment, brought to you by the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Right now, most lawns are at the height of their growing season, so we're all too familiar with mowing at this time. And if you'd like to make that process a little more peaceful, check out the new 40-volt, 20-inch brushless push mower from Ryobi. The brushless technology allows it to deliver gas-like power without the hassle of gas, oil, maintenance, or noise. The high-capacity 6-amp-hour battery provides extended runtime, so you can cut up to a half an acre on a single charge. Wow. You can choose between bagging or mulching your grass and select the ideal grass height with the 7-position single-point height adjustment. If you prefer mowing in the cooler evening hours, the high-intensity LED headlights, what? Come on now. Here we go.
Does it have a cup holder?
So the high-intensity LED headlights provide the necessary light so that you can mow at night. That is all right. That's crazy. Now, I'm liking this. And the collapsible telescoping handles make storage very easy, either horizontally or vertically. Think about that, being able to hang your mower on the wall of your garage to save room.
Yeah, and actually you couldn't do that with a gas mower because, of course, all the oil and gas would leak out.
Absolutely. So I know we've piqued your interest, and, of course, we know the quality that's behind each and every Ryobi tool. So for more information on this, and it's the Ryobi 20-inch, 40-volt cordless battery push lawnmower, just log on to HomeDepot.com That's pretty.
That is great.
Pretty
and
cool.
by the way, when Danny says it's called the brushless mower, the brushless refers to the motor. The electric motor in it is a brushless
That's
motor,
right.
no replaceable brushes. So we've seen that technology in power tools, and now it's going to a lawnmower with headlights.
Right now, we're going to go to Texas, and Jeff is on the line. Jeff, welcome to today's Homeowner Radio Show.
Thank you.
Good to be with you, and I understand you're about to spend some time out on the patio, but you're not quite comfortable. Tell us all about it.
Well, I've got a fairly large covered patio that shares the roof with the house. It's all one roof. The patio also has a ceiling, so it has an attic. The whole house is insulated with spray foam from the ridge down to the sill plate, except for this little patio area. It has no insulation at all, but it does have a plastic and spray foam wall built around it to isolate it from the attic of the conditioned space. And I'm getting a lot of heat, I think, radiating downward onto my patio because this area over the patio is not insulated whatsoever, and it's not vented. So I think it builds up a lot of heat, and that radiates downward. I'm trying to figure out if I need to insulate maybe just the ceiling of that attic space, so just isolate the patio, in other words, or if I need to insulate the whole area, including the roof, to keep that all in the same envelope as the house.
I got you. Well, Jeff, what you're describing is exactly what I have at my house. And I built a new house recently, and it's a unique situation because what a lot of people don't realize when you're having a house foamed, that you really don't go into those garage areas or, in this case, patios or porches because you really want to wrap the envelope around just the heated and cooled areas. Now, here's what I did on my patio that described exactly what you're talking about there. Yes, that heat is building up in that space, and is certainly going to radiate down and cause that ceiling to be hotter than it needs to be. Now, and also another thing that people don't understand about foam houses a lot, that you do not vent them. You do not have soffit vents and exhaust fans and so forth because it's all somewhat heated and cooled, even the attic space. Now, I did put soffit vents in that particular part of my house so that air could come into that area, and then I have a couple fixed vents on the roof so that the convection, the cool air in, the hot air out. But I did go back on the back side of my ceiling on the attic area, and I used a mineral wool insulation because it's moisture resistant, mold resistant, and so forth, and I laid that right down. It really made a big difference because the excessive heat is getting out. It's not affecting the envelope of the home, and then I have that extra protection of the mineral wool directly on top of it. So that's what I would suggest you doing for your house. It worked perfect to keep that outside area a lot cooler during the summer.
I see. Okay, yeah, that sounds right. I mean, you got to let the air in and out somehow, and then also isolate that ceiling.
That's exactly right.
I didn't know if you isolated the ceiling and insulated the roof, if that would all be considered in conditioned space.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't. I would leave your plastic curtain up and your foam that you have there for separation so that envelope works like it should. And then I would handle this as a separate space just to give you. Now, I had the same situation in my garage. And what I did there actually is install a solar powered attic exhaust fan because I didn't want to have to get the electrician to wire it. I cut the hole and put it right in place, pulled the little tab, and it started exhausting air. I could actually feel the difference of that air flowing through because this garage is a lot bigger than the porch, and that worked out well, and that's another option for you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my garage is attached as well, and it's within the envelope, which is interesting.
Yeah. Normally they don't do that. Normally they'd put the same plastic curtain up like that. I mean, because the foam's expensive and you hate to put it out there. Yeah. But they were really adamant about not going over an unheated, cooled spot. So after doing my little bit of studying about it, I realized they were right, and this is the alternative for it. So I think you'll see a big difference on that. And I'm glad we were able to have you here on the Today's Homeowner Radio Show.
All right, thank you. Well, I appreciate the help. I'll see what I can get done.
Well, Joe, I'm seeing a weather forecast here and there, and I'm seeing it inching up above 90. I thought maybe we should drop in a few reminders. We don't want to put any pressure on anybody of things they have to do, but just little reminders, starting with that air conditioning system, making sure you get it serviced, because if you get it serviced, they may discover something that's that could shorten the life of it that they can correct, or just cleaning it, calibrating it a little bit, that'll make it a lot more efficient during the hot summer ahead.
Yeah, and this is, here we are, the first week of June. You don't want to wait any longer, because if you call an air conditioning contractor, an HVAC contractor, in the middle of July or August, he might not be able to get to your house right away. So I would call them as soon as possible. Just do a routine check. One of the biggest concerns we hear are clog condensate lines, right? There's a condensate line that runs, usually it's a small 3/4 inch or so PVC pipe that runs off the drip pan underneath the air conditioner unit in the house, and it condensation runs out of it and drains usually outdoors. If that clogs up, guess what? It's going to back up into that pan, and that pan can only hold so much water, and then you're going to have a leak. So have that serviced, or service it yourself. We show on todayshomeowner.com. You can find articles on how to clean out that line. I heard, Danny, I think it's 90 or 95% of all AC service calls are for a clogged condensate line.
No kidding. Wow.
And to get someone to come out, it's going to cost you, depending on where you live, it might be $100 or more, and you can easily do it yourself. In fact, there's also a website that I've visited regularly. It's called allaccessdevice.com. allaccessdevice.com, and it's run by a air conditioner contractor with over 30 years experience. I've talked to him several times. He's a really knowledgeable guy, and he designed this little piece of pipe that you just cut into your condensate line, makes it really easy to clean it out. So that's probably the most important thing to do first and foremost.
That's perfect. And when we're talking about, sometimes your air conditioning system will just completely shut down, and you're checking the breaker, you're trying to figure out what it is. On the same lines, a lot of times in your air conditioning pan, your drain pan that's under your unit, if it gets full, a lot of times it has some of the newer systems have little float switches that will automatically turn the system off to keep it from running and prevent that water from spilling over and causing all of that damage that we hear about all of the time. So a lot of times it may be just turning off as a safety feature, and all you have to do is get that good and clean. So right now, this weekend, take a cup of bleach, find that little outlet that's right by your air handling unit, whether it's in the hallway or whether it's in the attic. You'll have a cap on it there. Sometimes they don't have a cap. Either way, it's not glued. You just open it right up. It's usually a 1 inch or 3/4 inch PVC pipe, and pour that cup of bleach down in there so that it can kind of kill a lot of that mold and mycelia and all those other big words that grow inside that pipe. And again, Joe mentioned online, we have some really good videos, including one where you can use a shop vac on the outside of the house in the condenser line, hook to it, turn it on for, maybe 3 seconds, and it completely clears everything that's in there out. Not a bad maintenance thing to do this weekend as well. Hey, also the ceiling fans you're looking up. Okay, look up at that ceiling fan. If it's running counterclockwise, well, you're doing the right thing, because you want that air to blow down on you, and it's only cooling if you're in the room. It's not cooling the room, it's cooling you if you're in the room. So don't waste electricity leaving that thing running all of the time. So very important there. And of course, Joe, we talk about sealing the envelope of the home is just as important during the summer as it is during the winter. Yeah,
insulation doesn't only keep your house warm, it keeps it from getting too hot. So, in the winter it'll keep it warm, but in the summer and keep it from getting too hot inside. And we always say, Danny, right? The start in the attic. That's the very best place to put insulation. You almost always get that money back. And if you go up inside your attic and you see the very top of the ceiling joists, like the top of the ceiling joists are visible, it means you don't have enough insulation. And that's all you need to know. And you can check with the building department in your area, but typically you need 14 to 16 inches of insulation in the attic, no matter where you are. And the only caveat is do not pack the insulation deep into the eave of the house, because you don't want to block any airflow. If you have soffit vents, you want to make sure that air can flow up and out through the ridge vent or gable end vents.
That's right. This time of the year, time to kind of be a little proactive so that you're not shocked by some of those power bills that you might get.
And Danny, we should mention the 4 Seasons of Home Ownership. If you've not seen this, it's online at todayshomeowner.com. And we have basically little maintenance and repair chores you should be doing around your house year round. We broke it down to 4 seasons. So right now you'd go to, the spring or summer. It's not quite summer yet, but
right.
And you won't need to do all of them. Don't panic when you see the list, because there might be 10 or 12 things on the list, but you might only need to do 2 or 3. But it is a good reminder, even if you don't get to it right away, that you need to get to it sometime this summer.
Yeah, it gives you a great peace of mind knowing that you are taking care of what's probably your biggest investment you have, and making sure that it is performing like it should, maintained well, and so forth. Joe, a few weeks ago, we were talking about putting in a post and using concrete to do that.
Right.
I mean, traditionally, you and I, being a little more old school, you put the bag of concrete in a wheelbarrow, you mix it up with the hoe, you get it just right, and you pour it down in the hole. Well, our friends at Quikrete, of course, developed this fast-setting concrete red bag, and they tout that you don't have to do that. You just pour it in around it and put water on it, and it'll set up, and it's just as strong as anything else. And I just had a hard time wrapping my arms around that, how could it mix? How could it really have evenness and that kind of thing? But I understand recently someone shared with you something that proved their point.
That's right. I saw a video online. There was a contractor who had the same thought Danny and I had, which is, okay, so you just dump the dry concrete into the hole around the post, you pour in a little water, and it just hardens. Like, well, how do we know it hardens? It's under the ground somewhere. And what this contractor did is he did exactly that. For 150-pound bag of fast-setting concrete, you use 1 gallon of water. You pour the water in after you pour in the concrete. And he came back the next day with a little backhoe and yanked it out of the ground.
Wow.
And it was perfectly hard. And they show him hammering on the concrete with a pretty good-sized framing hammer, and it was solid. So there you go. There's proof positive.
We'll have to share that with our friends at Quikrete, that it does work just like they say. We love to get your emails, and you can send us one at todayshomeowner.com/ask. Here's one right now from Joey from Georgia. Kind of like his sense of humor here. He says, Danny, our 2-story house is on a shady piece of property. So in this humid climate, it grows mold and mildew faster than I can grow a beard. That's pretty bad.
That's bad, yes.
I like that. But because the house is so tall, it's really hard to get to the 2nd story with any type of pressure washer. And like most people, I really don't like ladders. I really don't like ladders. But and I'll tell you, if you're using a ladder and trying to use a pressure washer,
yeah, that could be dangerous.
Yeah, that thing could blow you right off of there. But, Joey goes on and says, if I don't clean the outside of the house at least once a year, it really looks terrible. How can I slow down the growth of this mold? Well, Joey, I completely understand. We have the same battle all along the Gulf Coast where I live, and the shade and humidity are, really, that's the perfect conditions for mold to grow. But I'll tell you, I found something. Matter of fact, I used it last week on my house that I'm about to sell that has some pretty high elevations on it, and the thought of getting up on the ladder and everything was not something I wanted. So our friends at Wet and Forget have this extreme hose-in applicator, and what you do is it comes right out of the pack. You put your hose to it. It has a one setting that's just for water that you blow a little water out if you need to, and then you turn it, and it'll automatically mix the right amount of water with the Wet and Forget exterior cleaner, and in this one container will clean up to 2,000 square feet of your home. And of course, your refills will screw right into the same nozzle from the original bottle, so it makes it very economical to go. But this thing will shoot up to 30 feet. Now, you have hoses, and sometimes, you get the special sprayer on it, and maybe you get a little bit, 15 or 20 feet out of it. Maybe this will go 30 feet. So unless you really have a tall house, this will take care of everything. So a short amount of time, you can walk around that house, spray the Wet and Forget on it, and sit back, and it'll take care of all of the rest of the work. No rinsing, no scrubbing. You don't have to do a thing. It'll take a little bit of time, but it'll gradually work off all of that mold. And the good thing, it has a residual effect that will keep working up to a year. So once a year, you spray some Wet and Forget on it, and you're done. And you can find out more on wetandforget.com. That's a lot easier than trying to do all of the pressure washing that so many people have to do. We get a lot of emails, a lot of calls about people just really found out about a simple solution that Joe shared with us, used it, and it worked fantastic for them. And so we appreciate all of those emails. So, Joe, the pressure's on, buddy. What do you got?
Yeah, thank you, Danny. I appreciate that. Well, this one, like most of them, I know works because I tried it myself. And this is, have you ever not been able to get all the paint out of a spray paint can? Of course, because the tips always clog and it's almost impossible. And spray paint is relatively affordable unless you figure out how much, if you calculate how much you're paying per ounce of paint. It actually can be pretty expensive. So I hate throwing away a can when you can feel like there's still a third of the can left. So anyway, how do you prevent that from happening? Well, there are a couple of ways. First, after you spray paint something, before putting the can away, turn it upside down and spray it for a few seconds until you see it running clear, meaning the paint has come out of this tip and it'll be running a little clear. And then what I do is I pull off the top, the little spray cap, the little spray tip, I pull it off and I drop it into a small jar of mineral spirits, of paint thinner, essentially, right? And then when it's time to reuse the can, I pull it out. And what happens, of course, is the paint thinner will soften any of the paint that's left in the spray tip. And the spray tip, it has the little hole where the paint comes out, but it also has a hole, slightly larger hole, that comes up from the can. So you let it soak in there and it dissolve all that hardened paint. Then when you pull it out, and sometimes I can just put it right on the spray paint can and spray it. Perfect. Comes right out 9 out of 10 times. If it's still a little clogged, what I've found is you can ream out those holes with a twist tie. Take any twist tie that comes off like a loaf of bread, pull off the little paper or plastic covering, and that wire I discovered is just the right diameter to go into the spray hole. The hole on the bottom is plenty big enough. You fit in almost anything, but the little wire will go in the spray hole, dip it in a little mineral spirits, slide it in and out, get out all that paint. Very seldom does this not, even a really clogged spray tip, this has worked and allows you to get that last bit of paint out of the can.
Now, years ago, you would hear something like this, and you'd go, well, that's just a lot of work. Spray paint's so cheap. Why bother do all that? Right. Not anymore. They're pretty proud of their paint now, and it is getting more and more expensive, and you can use spray paint for so many different things. Certainly another great simple solution for my buddy Joe Truini, one that I use all the time. So I use a lot of spray paint. Just spray painted some containers for patio and use that exact same tip.
Yeah.
So
good.
We practice what we preach here at Today's Homeowner. This week on our podcast question of the week, and we would certainly encourage you to send us one at any time at todayshomeowner.com/podcast. This is from Kevin, and Kevin says, the house my wife and I own has a porch with tongue and groove wood for a ceiling. There is a 1/2-inch OSB board under the tongue and groove. How do I find the joints so that I can hang a front porch swing? I tried to get in the attic, but we have spray foam insulation under our roof deck, and there's a barrier between the attic and the area above the porch. How can I be sure the swing will stay where we put it? Okay, well, that's always
important.
That's important. I'll tell you what, a swing, has weight, but then you put 2 or 3 people in it and you swing, it better really be secure. And, just simply putting a lag bolt or a lag eye hook in there, I just don't recommend that. It really needs to go through a piece of wood and have a large washer and nut on the other end so that you're, able to take advantage of the full strength and integrity of the wood that you're working in. But often you have to add those pieces of wood. So I know what he's talking about here, Joe, with it being a spray foam insulation. It's where between the house and the porch, there will be a wall there. A lot of times it'll be a mesh. A lot of times it's plastic and they blow the foam on it. Well, more often than not, I've had to cut little holes in that. If you take a bread knife or a razor knife, you can cut right through that, carefully remove that to gain access to the porch. And that way they can position the swing exactly where they want it, but then they can add the additional wood to ensure that it is going to stay where they put it. I would hate to just guess at where any ceiling joist is there and hope that it holds up.
Right, and not even if you knew where the ceiling joists are, they're almost never where you need them, right? Because this swing has to be in a pretty particular spot, right? You don't want it too far away from the railing so it's taking up a lot of space, and obviously you don't want it anywhere near a door, maybe even a window. So the idea is to put in some 2x4 cleats, for lack of a better word, horizontally, flat against the ceiling, going across at least 2 joists, and then you can screw up into those joists. And as Danny said, then you can, before putting it up, you can put the bolt through it. Bevel, cut those ends of the cleat at 45 degrees, so it's a nice clean edge as you're looking up at it. Paint it the same color as the ceiling, you won't even see it. And the great thing about that, not only is it being fastened securely to 2 or 3 joists, however many you can cover, but you can put it wherever you want. Once those are up, then you can hang the swing either from one end, from the middle of the cleat. It doesn't have to be in any particular spot on the cleat, so you can put the swing exactly where you want it. So yeah, that would be the way to go. But to answer Kevin's question initially is, how do you find the joist? Well, you could use a stud sensor, an electronic stud sensor. I've never had a lot of luck with those. There's a phone app called Wallbot, B-O-T, which apparently looks through walls and will find it, which I've not used either. I usually just, tell you the truth, I just take my hammer or my fist, I tap on it, and you can tell where it's hollow and where it's not, and I make a guess, and then I drive up a couple of finishing nails till I find the center. And these holes will all be covered by the 2x4 cleat, so if you make a couple of holes, it won't matter. But try to find the exact center, again, of at least 2, and then screw 2 joists, and then screw this cleat to the joist.
Boy, it's well worth a little bit of investigation before you just hang that swing. I know you're anxious to get it up there real quick and enjoy swinging on the porch, but take your time in making sure that it does stay there, because I've seen a lot of swings that just don't look very good once they collapse, and if you are in it, you might not look too good either. So,
and Kevin, don't make the mistake of saying, "Hey, honey, I finished the swing. Come test it out," because that never works out well.
Yeah, you got to be careful. Go ahead and test it out first, Kevin, before you try another victim. And hey, we're so glad to be able to get questions, and we again encourage you to send us one here that we'll answer on the podcast, todayshomeowner.com/podcast. And another thing, if you'd like to send us some ideas for some subjects that you would like for us to dig in a little bit, we do a lot of extra podcasts as well, and there may be just something that you want to really hear in depth a little bit more. Send us those suggestions, and we'll read each and every one of them and see if we can't provide you that type of information. And we certainly appreciate all the great reviews we've gotten. They keep us aware of some of the 5-star and 4-star reviews we get. We really appreciate each and every one of those, and hope we're providing you the kind of information you want here on the Today's Homeowner podcast. We really appreciate you being with us. I'm Danny Lipford, along with my buddy Joe Truini. Thanks so much for listening to this Today's Homeowner podcast. We'll talk with you soon.